All right, so today we're really getting into some of the fundamentals, the essential building blocks of Microsoft Azure.
Yeah, the core stuff, the base upon which everything else sits.
Exactly, Azure Cloud Architecture. And for this deep dive, we're turning to a great source, Bossil's Knowledge Bunker.
Oh, those guys are good. Super practical stuff.
Yeah, their whole theme is giving IT back, which I love.
It's about sharing knowledge, right? Not hoarding it.
Absolutely. So we're going to be focusing on a few key areas today. Azure regions, subscriptions, and that big one, cost management. How to keep those cloud bills from getting out of control. Our mission, if you will, is to give you a solid grasp of these Azure concepts in a way that's clear, concise, and doesn't get bogged down in the weeds.
No jargon overload.
Exactly. We want to make sure this is something you can actually use. So to kick things off, let's take a look at what Bossil's Knowledge Bunker has put together for us.
All right, let's jump right in.
Okay, so they've titled this first slide, Slide 1, Azure Cloud Architecture, Regions, Subscriptions, and Cost Management.
Kind of sets the stage, doesn't it?
It really does. It's like the roadmap for our conversation today. We're going to be hitting all those key areas they've laid out. Azure's global reach with those regions, how you can subscribe and pay for Azure services, the strategies and tools you can use to manage your costs, and of course, the governance mechanisms that help keep everything well governed. The big takeaway here, and they emphasize this right on the slide, is that Azure is built to provide reliable, scalable cloud services. But it's also designed to give you the control you need to manage your spending.
It's that balance, isn't it? Power and control. It's not just about throwing technology at a problem. It's about doing it in a smart, financially responsible way.
Right, efficiency.
Yeah.
So let's dig a little deeper into that first key area, Azure regions.
Okay, slide 2.
Azure regions, global infrastructure, that's the title. This is where you really start to see the scale of Azure's global presence. We're not talking about a few scattered data centers here. This is a massive, globally distributed network. And these data centers are organized into what are called regions, specific geographic areas spread across the world. Now, a region isn't just a single building. It can actually consist of multiple interconnected data centers, all linked by those high-speed, low-latency networks that we always hear about.
Yeah, it's like a mini network within a region, making sure everything stays connected and fast.
Exactly. And the numbers are pretty impressive, as this slide points out. Over 50 regions spanning over 140 countries. That kind of global reach is more than just a bragging right. It unlocks some serious advantages for users.
Right, it's strategic.
Totally. There are two main benefits they highlight here. First, by distributing these regions across the globe, you can position your applications and data closer to your users, wherever they happen to be. That's huge for performance, right? You want things to be fast and responsive, especially if you've got a global user base.
Nobody likes lag.
Nope. And the second benefit is data residency. It's becoming more and more important to comply with regulations that dictate where certain types of data can be physically stored. Having those regions strategically placed helps you meet those requirements. And here's an interesting point. While you'll typically choose a specific region for most of your Azure resources, some services operate globally.
Like they're not tied down to a single region.
Right, they're region agnostic. Azure Active Directory is a good example. It operates on a global scale, so you've got that mix of regional and global services working together.
Okay, that's a good distinction to make. Regional versus global services. They each play a different role in the overall architecture. But let's keep moving. We've got resilience to talk about.
Okay, slide 3. Regional pairs. Ensuring resilience. This is about how Azure is designed to keep your services running even though something goes wrong in a particular region. And it all comes down to these regional pairs.
Backups, basically.
Yeah, but it's more sophisticated than that. Think of it this way. Almost every Azure region around the world has a designated partner region. They're like buddies. And except for one, Brazil South, every region has a buddy.
Oh, poor Brazil South, all alone.
Yeah, well, they're working on finding a friend, I'm sure. But anyway, these pairs aren't random. They're carefully chosen and strategically located to build in redundancy.
So if one region goes down, the other one can pick up the slack?
Precisely. And to minimize the risk of both regions in a pair being affected by the same problem, Azure aims to keep them physically separated by at least 300 miles. This helps protect against things like natural disasters or those widespread power outages that can knock out a whole region. So if one region goes down, the other one is likely to stay up. And if a major regional outage does occur, Azure prioritizes recovery efforts to bring at least one region in each pair back online, ASAP. They want to get you back up and running as quickly as possible. Plus, And this is pretty cool. Many Azure services offer automatic replication of your data to that paired region. It's an extra layer of protection, especially if business continuity is critical for you.
Yeah, that automatic replication is a game changer. It can significantly reduce downtime and potential data loss. It's peace of mind, basically. So we've got these regions, these regional pairs, all this infrastructure, but how do you actually organize and manage it all within Azure?
Right, that's where subscriptions come in. Slide 4, subscriptions, organizational units.
Okay, so in simple terms, what exactly is an Azure subscription?
Think of it as your key to the Azure kingdom. It's the basic building block for accessing and using all the services. It acts as a billing boundary and a security boundary that's linked to your Azure account.
Okay.
It's how you organize and control access to those cloud resources.
So anything I do in Azure, like setting up a virtual machine or a database, it all has to sit within a subscription?
You got every resource you deploy in Azure, virtual machines, databases, storage networking, anything has to belong to a specific Azure subscription.
Right.
Think of it as its home address in the Azure world.
Perfect. And the guide also highlights how subscriptions affect our billing.
Absolutely. They are central to billing. All your costs for Azure services are tracked and billed per subscription. You get a single combined bill for each subscription at the end of your billing cycle.
So businesses can track their cloud spending for different teams or projects that way?
Exactly. That's a key benefit.
Yeah.
Azure gives you a lot of flexibility in how you set up billing and payments.
Okay.
Organizations can use multiple subscriptions to divide their cloud costs based on how they're structured.
Right.
You could have separate subscriptions for different departments, projects, or even geographic business units.
I see.
This makes it way easier to monitor spending, allocate costs to the right places, and get a clear picture of where your cloud budget is going across the entire organization.
So it's not just about where the invoice goes, but also who can access and manage those resources?
Exactly. Subscriptions also function as a security and administration boundary for controlling access.
Okay.
You decide who has permission to create, manage, and use the resources within a specific subscription.
Got it.
It's vital for security, ensuring different teams have the right access to their environments and stopping unauthorized changes.
Makes sense.
The guide mentioned the subscription ID, which is a unique identifier for each subscription.
Yeah.
It's often needed when you're interacting with Azure programmatically. It's a fundamental part of automation and managing your infrastructure.
Okay.
Think of it as the unique account number for all your Azure stuff.
Okay, great. So subscriptions are essential, these organizational units.
Yeah.
But how do we actually get these subscriptions? Are there different ways to do it?
That's a great question, and it leads us to our next slide.
Okay.
Slide 5, subscription options, finding your fit.
Okay, so are there different ways to subscribe to Azure?
Absolutely. Microsoft offers a range of subscription options designed for different needs,
Okay,
from huge enterprises to individual developers and even students.
cool.
A common one, especially for larger companies, is the enterprise agreement.
What does that involve?
With an enterprise agreement, big customers commit to spending a specific amount of money on Azure upfront.
Okay,
That amount is then consumed over the year across any Azure services they want.
That-
One big plus with enterprise agreements is that they usually have better pricing and a solid service level agreement, or SLA,
right.
which, as the guide says, is typically about a 99.95% uptime guarantee every month.
It's pretty good.
It is this commitment and assurance are really important for those mission-critical systems.
So that's for big companies with ongoing big needs and a desire for stable pricing and high availability. What about smaller companies or individuals with needs that might change more?
For them, going through resellers and partners is usually a better fit.
Okay,
Azure services can be bought through Microsoft's network of resellers using open licensing.
right.
This is simpler and more flexible. You don't have that huge upfront commitment of an enterprise agreement.
I see.
Plus, organizations can choose to work with Microsoft partners who are experts at designing, implementing, and managing customized Azure solutions.
Okay.
These partners can offer valuable advice support and tailored services to help businesses really maximize their use of Azure.
And I think I saw something about free accounts and options specifically for students.
Yep. Microsoft has great ways for new users to explore Azure and for students to learn these cloud technologies hands-on.
Cool.
If you're new, you can sign up for a free Azure account, which comes with a $200 credit.
Okay.
You can use that to try out different Azure services in the first 30 days.
Nice.
This free account also gives you ongoing free access to a bunch of popular Azure services for a whole year.
Wow.
so you can get comfortable with the platform without spending much money.
That's great.
And for students, there's a special program that gives them $100 in Azure credits for 12 months.
Okay.
They don't even need a credit card to sign up, so it's super accessible.
Perfect. Okay, so we've covered where Azure's infrastructure is and how we get access to it, but now for the million-dollar question, how do we manage and control our spending?
Yes, that's always top of mind, right?
It is.
Let's get into that with slide 6, cost management, monitoring and control.
Okay, now this is where we can hopefully start saving some money.
Definitely, if you don't manage them, cloud costs can become a big expense.
For sure.
Having the right tools and strategies to keep your Azure spending in check is essential.
Totally.
And good news, Azure gives you a full set of cost management features built right into the platform.
So the first thing they mention is being able to explore and analyze your costs. What exactly does that give you?
Azure's cost management tools break down exactly where your money is going in the cloud.
Okay.
You can drill down and see which services, resources, even individual instances are using resources and costing you money.
Okay.
That granular view is the first step to understanding your spending habits and finding places to optimize.
Right, and you can also see your spending trends over time in a broader way.
Yes, you can view the total costs for your entire organization.
Okay.
Or you can filter and analyze costs for specific subscriptions, resource groups, or tagged resources.
Okay.
This helps you see trends. Are your costs going up, down, staying the same?
Right.
You can also track your total spending against your budget forecasts for different time periods, like monthly, quarterly, or annually. It's really helpful for planning and accountability.
Speaking of budgets, our source mentions setting up budgets in Azure. How does that work?
Within Azure Cost Management, you can set specific budget amounts for your subscriptions, resource groups, or even based on tags.
Okay.
This helps you proactively plan and manage your spending according to your financial goals.
Right.
And you can even configure alerts so you're notified when spending hits a certain threshold, like 80% or 100% of your budget.
Okay.
This helps you stay on top of things and prevent going over budget.
So it's not just about looking at past spending, but setting limits for future spending. And what about this advisor recommendations thing that was mentioned for cost management?
Oh, Azure Advisor is a super helpful service.
Okay.
It analyzes your Azure environment all the time and gives you advice in different categories, including how to optimize costs. It can spot idle resources or things that are underutilized and suggest ways to cut costs.
Okay.
Like resizing virtual machines or using different, more cost-effective service tiers. It can also point out opportunities to use reserved instances or the Azure Hybrid benefit.
I see.
It's like having a built-in consultant helping you get the most out of your cloud budget.
That sounds super valuable.
Right.
Okay, to really get a handle on tracking and managing costs, let's talk about this next slide.
Okay.
Resource tagging. Organizational strategy.
Right.
This sounds like a way to add more information to our Azure resources, sort of like labels.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's like adding metadata to your resources.
Okay.
Resource tagging means assigning key value pairs called tags to your Azure resources.
Okay.
For example, you could tag a virtual machine with environment, production, or department, marketing.
So how do these simple tags help with managing things and controlling costs?
They're really powerful for organizing and categorizing your resources.
Okay.
First, they make managing resources a lot easier. You can filter, sort, and group things based on tag values.
Yeah.
Even if those resources are in different resource groups or subscriptions.
Excellent.
It makes finding and managing related resources much simpler. And the guide specifically mentioned tagging being useful for billing data.
Yes. And why is that?
This is a huge benefit for cost management. When you download your Azure usage and billing reports, you can actually group and analyze the cost data using the tags you've applied.
Oh, wow.
This lets you see your spending broken down by whatever makes sense for your organization.
Right.
Like by project, by department, by cost center, or even by application.
Got it.
It gives you a way more detailed and insightful view of where your budget is being used compared to just a basic list of services you're using.
That's way more practical for figuring out what's really driving costs. Are there any best practices for creating and using these tags?
For sure, the key is to have a clear and consistent plan for your tags.
Okay.
One that aligns with your organization's needs and how you want to allocate costs.
Right.
So once you set your tagging standards, like which tags are required and what values are allowed,
Yeah.
you need to make sure those tags are applied to all relevant resources across all your subscriptions.
Right.
You can apply tags to individual resources or to resource groups.
Okay.
But remember, tags on a resource group aren't automatically passed down to the resources inside.
Right.
So be careful to apply them at the right level for complete tracking.
So consistency and a good tagging strategy are really important to get the most out of this for both management and cost control.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we know how to monitor and track costs. But let's get into some ways to actually reduce those costs.
Let's do it.
This brings us to slide 8, cost optimization strategies.
Right.
This is where we can really see some potential savings,
Hopefully.
right? So Azure has a few programs and features to help you actively optimize your spending.
Yes.
And the first one mentioned is reservation savings.
Okay.
So how can Azure reservations help us save money?
They let you cut down on costs for certain predictable workloads by committing to a certain amount of capacity.
Okay.
Like for virtual machines, Azure SQL database compute capacity or Azure Cosmos DB throughput, you commit for 1 or 3 years, and in return, you get a big discount compared to the regular pay-as-you-go pricing.
Okay.
The guide says these discounts can be up to 72% off your compute costs.
Wow, that's huge. So if I know I'll need a specific kind of virtual machine running for the next year, it makes sense to reserve it.
Exactly. It's a great option for workloads that are stable and predictable.
Makes sense. And then there's the Azure Hybrid benefit. What does that one do?
If you've already got licenses for Windows Server and SQL Server that include software assurance,
All right.
you can use those same licenses for those workloads running in Azure.
Okay.
So you don't have to pay for the licenses twice.
Right.
This can save you a ton on your virtual machines running Windows Server and your Azure SQL databases.
So if you're already using Microsoft stuff on premises, this is a good way to maximize that investment when you move to Azure.
Absolutely. And lastly, the guide talks about benefits for Visual Studio subscribers.
Yeah.
Many Visual Studio subscriptions include monthly Azure credits. Developers can use those credits to experiment and build on Azure services,
Right.
so they can create and test new solutions in their own sandbox environment without using up the organization's main Azure subscriptions.
That's nice.
It encourages innovation and helps control development and testing costs.
Yeah.
It's a great resource for developers to learn and explore.
So whether you're a big company with long-term needs, an organization with existing Microsoft licenses, or a developer just trying things out there are solid ways to optimize costs.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered infrastructure access and cost management. Our final slide touches on governing all this at the organizational level.
Right.
Management groups and Azure policy.
Right.
This seems to be about setting up rules and enforcing them at a larger scale.
Yeah. As organizations use Azure more and more, setting up solid governance and making sure everyone follows the rules across all their cloud resources becomes super important.
Right.
And management groups and Azure policy are 2 key services that help you do just that.
Okay, so let's start with management groups. What are they and how do they help organize all those Azure subscriptions?
Management groups add a level of organization above individual subscriptions.
Okay.
They let you group your subscriptions into a flexible structure that reflects your company's organization.
Okay.
You could group by department, by geographic region, by business unit,
Makes sense.
and then you can manage access, apply policies, and view billing and reports at that management group level.
So you're basically putting related subscriptions together under one umbrella.
Exactly. But the real power is that anything you set at the management group level, like access controls or Azure policies,
Yeah.
those automatically apply to all the subscriptions underneath.
Wow.
And this goes down through any nested structure you might create.
Okay.
This keeps things consistent across the board, ensures the same policies are applied everywhere, and gives you a single place to check for compliance and overall governance.
That sounds like a huge time saver when you're dealing with a complex Azure environment with lots of subscriptions. So how does Azure policy fit into all of this?
Azure policy works hand in hand with this structure by letting you create, assign, and manage policies that enforce rules for your Azure resources.
Okay.
These policies can help make sure your organization follows security standards, industry regulations like HIPAA or GDPR, and your own service level agreements.
Right.
Azure policy constantly checks your resources and can either stop non-compliant resources from being deployed in the first place
Okay.
or flag existing resources that aren't following the rules.
I got it.
It's all about being proactive and constantly monitoring your Azure environment.
So management groups set up the structure for organizing our subscriptions, and Azure policy is how we define and enforce the rules within that structure.
Exactly.
It sounds like a powerful combo for managing Azure at scale while keeping things compliant and under control.
It gives organizations the tools they need to not just use the amazing power and flexibility of the cloud, but also to do it in a controlled, secure, and cost-effective way as they grow.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the core of Microsoft Azure.
Yes.
We looked at the global regions and regional pairs for reliability.
Right.
We unpacked Azure subscriptions.
Yep.
And we uncovered some essential strategies and tools for managing costs and setting up good governance.
It's been a good one.
It really has. And as we've seen, understanding these fundamental parts of Azure architecture is super important for anyone who's either using the platform already or thinking about moving to the cloud. It gives you the knowledge you need to make smart decisions about your cloud strategy, deploying resources, and how you manage everything.
Absolutely.
So for all of you listening, take a minute to think about how you can apply what we talked about today, specifically Azure regions, subscriptions, and cost management. How could you optimize your own projects or your organization setup for better performance and resilience? And what steps could you take to improve how you manage and maybe even reduce your cloud spending?
Good questions.
Maybe you want to check out the Azure pricing calculator or dig into the documentation on Azure policy.
Those are great places to start.
They are. They're great resources to keep learning. So that brings us to the end of another deep dive.
It does.
We hope this gave you valuable insights and a clearer understanding of how Microsoft Azure works at its core.
I hope so.
Stay tuned for more deep dives into other interesting and important aspects of cloud technology.
For sure.
Until next time, keep learning.
Absolutely.